This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening, and I'd like to call together this King George County Board of Supervisors budget work session. To start off, we'll start off with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Would anybody like to do invocation? Mr. Collins.
Please stand. Lord our God, help us trust you with our decisions and our future. Let us lean on you with all our heart instead of relying on our own imperfect selves. Understand me. Give us clear guidance in our life. Lord, we submit ourselves to you. We know that you will direct us our path, and we can have confidence that your direction is always the best way to go. Hear our prayer, Father, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
All right, thank you, everyone. Open the floor for public comment. I don't think we'll have any public comment in person. Mr. Dines, anybody online?
No.
Anybody have anything to be read in from folks? Okay, we will close public comment. Moving on to 3, expenditure discussion, Parks and Rec. Mr. Clark.
What do you say?
Thank you, sir.
Oh, there we go. Now it's on. I can go. So there were 2 questions that Ms. Hanan forwarded to me in reference to the 4 recreation and parks budgets. The first was in reference to the recreation activity fund athletics budgets under our line for professional services. And the response that she sent to the board, it mentioned that that contractor line appears, at least had the appearance of being up. It doesn't look like it is. That is a line where we pay sports officials, camp directors, things like that, folks that are not employees of the county, but are providing service for us. In that entire budget, in the activity fund budgets, those are all fee-for-service based budgets. So as long as, if anytime a line goes up there, hopefully we should have a corresponding revenue increase, whether it would be an increased fee or increased participation. So if there's no program, there's no expenditure. So that's where that budget falls. In reference to the Parks and Recreation Administration budget, we of course have a large increase this year due to the proposed transfer of the four parks employees to the Recreation and Parks Department and their corresponding expenses. So $256,239 is the increase from the FY22 to the FY23 budget. That is related to their salaries, FICA, Medicare, all those employee salary related expenses. Some of those are also, those increases are not just, most likely not just to those employees, some of it is due to the increases that we all received this year. There's $28,250 of increase for the transferred vehicles, mowers, and small engine equipment, so fuel, insurance, those things. We have a $2,500 increase for laundry. Those guys, as blue collar workers, they have a laundry service for their uniforms. We have a $3,900 increase for cell phones for those parks employees. $1,500 of that is a one-time cost for upgraded phones due to the new work order system that we've requested. $1,300 of training for those parks employees. We're looking to have one of them go to playground safety inspector program so that we can make sure our playgrounds are up to date and staying compliant. And then all 4 of them through to the fertilizer and pesticide applicators course. $300 is for memberships to the Virginia Sports Turf Management Association for both our parks and athletic staff. So that would be 6 employees total. That cost also includes an annual conference. So it's $50 an employee and also gets them an annual conference and that membership. $32,377 is a new line to our budget of, which is 6013, which is an attachment that I provided to you. That is for civic maintenance issues related to our parks. $27,000 is for a full sports turf management system. We have 43 acres of sports fields, split just about 50-50 between Bermuda grass and cool season and fescue cool season grass. And so that would include multiple applications of fertilizer and herbicides so that we can turn those fields into the proper sports tourism venues that they need to be. If you've been in many of our parks, especially like Sealston, if you're on the soccer fields and you go out there during the winter and say, oh, it looks really nice and green. That field is all supposed to be Bermuda. So in the winter, it should be all brown and dormant. So anything that's green is officially a weed for that field. Even though it might be good fescue, it's in the wrong place. So we have not had a set program for that. And our goal is by getting these employees trained and getting the right funding that we'll be able to turn those fields into sports tourism venues they should be. $1,350 of that line is for approved playground safety wood fiber. It's a fancy word for mulch, but according to ASTM standards, there's specific mulches that you should have on your playgrounds. And that would cover all of our park playgrounds. $3,900 for gravel and stone dust for parking areas, access roads, and the trail at Sedell Brooks Junior Park. We have not stone dusted that since we constructed it. We are having erosion issues. And in the next line on 6014, part of that $46,200 is to provide erosion control and drainage to Sedell Brooks Park. There's a couple places where we installed some boards to redirect water prior to my arrival because of erosion issues, which was going to hold the hill. Well, now those boards are redirecting the water, and the water is only crossing the paths at specific places, which is now caused ruts. So our plan is to excavate pipe underneath so that the water will go under the path and then be able to repair the path over top. The other drainage problems we have at Barnesfield Park, the water will fall in the fields and then comes off the fields and pools in the asphalted areas between fields A and B and between fields B and C, and keeps the fields wet. So we'd like to install a French drain type system where that water would then be moved off to the runoff areas and move away from the ball fields, which should make them be playable quicker after rain events. And then Hunter Field, based on the lease agreement we have with the schools, we're responsible for all repairs. If you've been to Hunter Field, there is a field drain that runs the length of the bleachers. That field drain is starting to fail in certain places and there are holes. We have worked with what we have right now. There's fear, and why we're budgeting this is that some of that pipe may be actually failing. And if the long-term plan is still to use that field, we need to actually excavate that pipe and either put caps on possibly. I'm hoping it'll be easy and we may be able to put hats essentially for the pipe to keep it around, knowing that it may not be a 25-year home for us, but if it's completely failed, we may need to replace much of the pipe, and it's just an unknown expense at this point, how far the damage is. We have $32,000 in the budget for new capital outlay for new equipment. We are in need of replacement of one mower, and then to be able to apply the fertilizer and herbicides, we would need a ride-on sprayer spreader as recommended by Arturo rep based on our acreage. And then the last one is the $4,200 for our new work order system called Productive Parks. It is a system that will allow us to do real-time work orders through cell phones, and be able to give checklists to our employees to use every day so that we'll be able to get reports back for them. We have some parks employees. We have one that's at Barnesfield every day. Obviously, that's a good 20-minute drive from the office. So for us to go see him, it's a challenge. But with this system, he actually will be able to see issues, take photos of the issues, submit them through the app to us. We'll get them in there, and we'll be able to jump on making those corrections if there's things that need purchased. They'll be able to submit their receipts. If they they go to Walmart or the hardware store and buy something, rather than having to drive that receipt to us, they can picture it, send it up to us, we can print it, take care of the control sheets. McDonald's staff very happy that we get a credit card purchase, maybe processed very quickly by the system. $2,600 of that cost is the annual cost, and $1,500 is or $1,600, sorry, is the one-time setup fee. So those are the summary of the increased cost. Are there any other questions?
Any questions? Ms. Kepka?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mr. Clark, for coming out. So I do have a question, the gravel for Sedell Brooks Park. When you say roadways, is that going to take care of all of the ruts in the parking lot too? And it's okay, you can, if you're not sure or yes or no, that's fine. I'm just, because I have stated multiple times, I frequent that park and I walk there. So I know exactly where you're talking about on the walking trail with the ruts and everything. It's in really bad shape, you're right, to try to do something to address it. But the parking lot, especially as you go, when you're coming in on the right and the deeper you go into the park, that whole right-hand side is just chewed up.
Yes. So one of the biggest challenge for Sedell Brooks Park's parking lot is it was not designed, to the best of my knowledge, to carry a tanker truck. With the service authority and the amount of times that, with the access they need through the parking lot to get to the Perkins Corner wastewater plant, I believe, and not an expert, that is the majority of the issues we're having with maintaining that parking lot. It was item number 12 for my CIP, so it didn't make the cut this year to be able to be a president of the board, that parking lot will need to be sooner rather than later resurfaced. But I don't believe we can do that until we've moved on with Perkins Corner, because to make a repair for passenger vehicles isn't going to hold up to those trucks. We make general properties at this time, and we continue to make strides to correct those potholes as they appear. To date, we've done lots of that with gravel, and I did a test this fall with a handful of bags of cold patch, and that seems to be holding up a little better. So I have not had discussions yet with Mr. Muncy, Mr. Pennington, about what our next steps are, although I did receive a complaint on Monday about the fact that especially the drop off when you come off the VDOT supplied road into the park has gotten worse, of what our next step is and how we can repair that. But yes, there definitely is going to need to be repairs done there, and whether some of those need to be done this year. And so Mr. Muncy and I will start working on that. And then going forward, I think for that parking lot, I don't know that gravel is the right answer. Every time we put down gravel, it seems we get a rain, we get an influx of people for flag football or soccer practice, and I can go shovel the gravel off out the base of the parking lot. So if cold patch may be our better aspect, a better-ish thing. So we're going to work to address that.
Okay, thanks very much.
Mr. Chair.
If I could add, I'll talk with the maintenance folks at the Service Authority. I think that's something that there could be a cost sharing deal. I mean, because we obviously are going to be there for a couple more years, and there might be some other ways of looking at this where maybe we keep some kind of an access road far to the right where only the Service Authority is. Because I think if you put asphalt down within a year, you're going to have broken up asphalt with kind of heavy equipment that gets in and out of there. So we'll discuss that with Mr. Clark and the Service Authority.
Mr. Chair, when we were looking at the courthouse design, there is a way to put a road in from Perkins Corner to the courthouse road. And so that is one option, because that could be a way that the tanker trucks could get off, because that was our whole idea if we rebuilt Perkins, was to utilize, what is the name of that road? I've just blanked on it, but the road down to go to the sheriff's office, that it can connect to Perkins Corner, and that might be a way to get the tanker trucks off of the park, because that was my concern too. Just want something to look into.
Anyone else? All right, I have a couple questions. You said your employees with credit cards. I hope those guys, they all have their tax exempt numbers as well with.
Yes, actually, the staff that I currently have has them. I don't know that the parks employees do. And we would weigh whether or not that was applicable with Ms. Hahn.
Yeah, that just came in my head when you were saying credit cards for the other folks. Lawnmowers at the parks now, who owns those? You or Mike?
Those are currently under the general properties budget, so they will transfer.
They're going to transfer over as well.
But one of them is has past 2,000 hours in life, And as I met with the Toro rep this morning, they said 2,500 is the absolute dream for a zero turn.
Okay. Since I just left the Rappahannock River Basin Commission, fertilizer and spraying of pesticides, any thoughts on using something that's non-nitrogen fertilizer wise, especially for Sealston, which is right there on the creek, Barnesfield, which is right on the Potomac? Didn't know if anybody has even looked into that. We just got into that big whole conversation today, so that just kind of came to my
At this
mind.
point, because we haven't had a program before, I have been advised multiple times by master gardeners to meet with the, he's with the co-op extension based out of Stafford because he's kind of the turf maintenance expert, and make sure we create a plan going forward that it's not just us with our limited knowledge of guessing, but working with the co-op extension to make sure we have the proper plans.
Okay. Security gate for Barnesfield, have we figured out a process of getting that closed and locked at night?
That we have not. First, without it, we have no process at that point, but that's one of the things we've looked at is that we have those security issues. Same as when we get to the point that Service Authority doesn't need to access Brooks, that we'll be able to secure that one as well at night, because it does have already has a gate, but we don't close it because of their need to get in 24/7.
Because we had a gate and it wasn't getting closed, and then it got torn up, and
Yes.
so you know that whole process. How much is Hunter Field actually used?
Hunter Field during the fall and spring is used 5 days a week, 5 or 6 days a week by Parks and Rec soccer. It is used by KGYA flag football, and it is used by the Greater King George Soccer Club. And they're a paying customer for us. So
Let's see, are my notes. And then talking about gravel, you ever heard of 21C? 21A is like rock dust, 21C is recycled concrete. And they take the old concrete from buildings and things, grind it all up, and it turns into a powder, small rock material. And after it gets wet and it gets packed down, it is as hard as concrete. So maybe you can get it, any of our local folks here that deal with that kind of stuff. I've used it and I've rolled it with a roller, and it's as hard as this floor. And it's some amazing stuff, and it's half the cost of gravel.
okay, yeah, that one I have
Just,
not.
while you were talking about that, I made a note to ask you about that, but that's another possible thing. And I tell you, and it packs just as hard as rock.
Okay.
So just a thought. That's all I have. Thank you. Next up, Chief Moody.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, members of the Citizen Advisory Committee, good evening to you. As you know, I have put into our budget request for our department a full-time deputy fire marshal. That position would act in the capacity as a fire inspector, a fire investigator, a public educator, and also a community risk reduction inspector. So that individual would wear a lot of hats. This would be a new position in our department and a new direction that the state, when we did the state came in and did a findings and recommendations, recommended it back in 2011. So here we are, 11 years ahead, and I am requesting it in our budget. As you know, as a board, every year we have been trying to keep up with the front line, the people running the calls, manning the shifts, making sure as our county grows and more people call 911, that's been our biggest target that we've been trying to address. It's no secret, our community is growing. We're seeing more plans come in. We're seeing more commercial buildings. We're seeing more buildings with more occupancies, which are good things in the community, but I think there's a need for this position. I had a couple slides I want to show you. What I handed out to you is a proposed fee schedule. And I know it looks like a lot. Some of that is things that we don't even have in King George today, okay? My goal would be is that we don't know what's going to happen down the road. We don't know who's going to come into the industrial park or a different operation. We hope that some of these things come to King George. Some of these processes and manufacturing processes are not in place. Some are. I want to flip through some of the slides, and if you have any questions, feel free to stop me, Mr. Chairman, if that's the direction you want to go with a meeting, or if you want to have it all at the end. Either way, it doesn't matter to me. But this is essentially the handout that you have. These are all the things. Currently, we are doing none of this today. Okay. These fees are lower than what I found in the region, and I did put in what Stafford, what Spotsylvania, and what the city of Fredericksburg is doing. I also put in what Westmoreland's doing and what Caroline's doing. There's a couple different models. One of the models is kind of a charge by the hour model. There's also another model, it depends on how big the building is. There's also another model that's based on flat fees. And the model that I'm proposing is based on pretty much a flat fee, with the exception of when it comes to reoccurrent notice of violations. These are people, you get your first one, there's no charge, but then you have a time frame, you're supposed to get your notice of violation fixed. The inspector goes back out, the notice of violation's not fixed. Well, then there's a charge because it's time and it takes time to go back to do the re-inspection. None of these charges are for government buildings. None of these charges are for school buildings. As far as religious, nonprofit, that would be to the purview of this board. I'm not sure what is done as far as the building and zoning when it comes to churches, if it comes to nonprofits and things like that, but I would imagine maybe you would follow suit with that. But I'm gonna go through my presentation. As you can see, my proposal was based on 4 different sections. One that has to do with facilities, occupancies, and general precautions against fire. The second, which deals with combustible storage and hazardous operations. The third deals with explosives and fireworks. And the fourth has to do with hazardous materials. Just want to touch on some of the benefits of a fire prevention program, and again, another name for it is a community risk reduction program. This makes for a safer community. It makes for safer buildings. It ensures that the life safety systems in these buildings are working correctly. It ensures that the codes, the fire and life safety codes are being followed. It protects the public. The public, they go stay at a hotel, they just go stay there. They assume and expect that the building life safety systems are being kept up. The sprinkler system works. The smoke alarm would go off if there was a fire. The kitchen hood system in a restaurant would activate if it had to, that it was inspected. It protects employees, and I'm not talking about our employees. I'm talking about the employees of the businesses. So at a Walmart, for example, Walmart has many employees. It protects those employees. Having a safer building and ensuring compliance with building life safety systems protects those employees. It protects our firefighters. As we go in, we're responding. If there's a call for, a hotel's on fire, restaurants on fire, it protects our firefighters. It holds people accountable to the law and to the code. It also saves money, and at the end, ultimately, it saves lives. We have the legal authority to do this, and I just wanted to put this in here. This is currently already in our ordinance, and highlighted is the section that says you can have the authority to promulgate regulations, fee schedules necessary to enforce and defray the cost of enforcement of the statewide fire prevention code. That was back in 2005. So that's on the books today. It's been on the books for a long time. We've never had it. We could do it at any day, but we just have to, number one, we need to do it at the level that I'm proposing. You got to have a full-time individual to do it. This is the county's building and zoning fee schedule, just an excerpt of it. You can see that it has there's already fees in there for, particularly when it comes to planning. So when a building submits a commercial building submits a site plan that has any of these things in here, it already has that included. Okay, a lot of this, we are already a part of that planning process today. I could take you to Company One and show you our whole records room of files and subdivision plats, commercial building site plans, neighborhood site plans, and we're reviewing them today. We're just not charging for it. We're the only one in the region not charging for it. So a little bit of a status of what's going on around the region. So City of Fredericksburg has 2 full-time and 1 part-time in the fire marshal's office. They have 3 full-time that are trained as a collateral duty and 2 full-time that are currently in the training process. Spotsylvania currently has 6 full-time in their fire marshal's office and also 1 public educator, so a total of 7. Stafford has 6 in their fire marshal's office, and 1 acts as a fire protection engineer, actually has a professional engineering degree. They also have put in for 2 civilian fire inspectors in their proposed budget this year. Caroline County does not locally enforce the statewide fire prevention code, and neither does Westmoreland. We do. We have no employee. We don't essentially have a fire prevention employee dedicated for doing these inspections and doing these investigations. Okay, and this is just I took some of the, in case there was any questions. Hey, what's Spotsylvania doing? What's Stafford doing? What's City of Fredericksburg? I'm not going to read this per se. This is directly off their websites. But Spotsylvania has kind of a hybrid system. They charge based on square footage. They pay based on how big a neighborhood is, whether it's after hours inspections, if it's a Saturday or Sunday or something, they have to go out. They even go down as far as saying the cost of a fire report. Now, we don't charge for a fire report. You can see in Spotsylvania, no disservice or discredit to them. My personal feeling is that if your house burns down and you come get a fire report and I say it's $5, I think it's a little bit of an insult myself. But we could charge it if you desire it. You can see Spotsylvania again. I will say that the fee schedule, proposed fee schedule I provided you is, it is less than what's in between the city, Stafford, and Spotsylvania. It's not much less, but it's less. Here's Stafford County. Again, this is a system based on how many like sprinkler heads they have, square footage they have. Then they have some flat fees and such. There's a little bit more all-inclusive, but they also have 6 full-time people that are, and it's a pretty significant county in size. And I'm happy to stay on them as long as you need me to, or go back to anyone. Just let me know. Sorry. Stafford County. Here's the city of Fredericksburg. City of Fredericksburg, they have a, you can see here, they kind of have a model about per hour, $150 per hour in some cases, 2 hours minimum in advance. They have, again, they also have a, depending on how many, with new constructions or inspections on how many sprinkler heads, square footage, hood systems, what type they are, where ours is more based on more of a flatter fee. They had something I don't see it in there, but they had something kind of specific that was just doing specifically to the city that I didn't see. I think it was, and that was part of the building. They have their building and fire kind of mixed in together. One was at Spa and Jet Tub. I didn't see that on any, but fire prevention wouldn't do that anyway. Any questions?
Questions? Mrs. Bender?
I have a question. This might be a silly question, but is this for residential only, or commercial and residential, or just commercial?
This is for commercial.
Okay.
The only residential that would apply into what is a subdivision residential plat, where they are proposing to put a subdivision. And when that happens, that's a plan review that we review the plans, we review the roads. That's the only thing, particularly for permits for residential. There is no fees for homes or.
Okay, so just commercial.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Chief, thank you for coming out, and thank you for putting this together. So you said we haven't been charging for these services that we have been providing so far, because you've been obviously reviewing plans. That's got to happen. Do you have an estimate for the amount of revenue that this would generate? Because I know for a position that's obviously an expenditure, but then this would, I don't know how much would offset, but an estimate?
It would. It's really hard to target it on for a first year. Now we have some, I even try to reach out, how many buildings do we have for commercial buildings and how many are occupied, were built. I would, and I think a very conservative value would probably be, 20 to 30,000 possibly. So it would not be I wouldn't go as far as saying this would make the position 100% whole.
Understood.
Maybe it would. Not knowing it for taking in consideration every building and structure that's out there that would need an annual inspection. The key is a lot of these are annual inspections.
Okay.
So when we go into a building you give a permit, the permit would be good for 1 year. You go back into let's say a fast food restaurant. Fast food restaurant operates a commercial hood system. So that permit would be good for 1 year. It also gives us the legal authority to go in there too, once they have a permit. So we can check it at any times or, but it'd be good for 1 year. So it'd be a lot of that would be reoccurring, not just 1 year and that's it.
So would part of the effort of the fire inspector then to be go out and find every single, to investigate and find out all things that need to be inspected and then set that up and
Yes. Yeah, it
Okay.
would be a creation of basically taking a program that's not there and coming up with a permit program.
okay.
Yes.
And then just one last question. So you said it's your model that you are proposing is flat fee unless it's a inspection because of a failure. And at that point, is it per hour? Is that how it was?
No, it would be, so it wouldn't be if there was it would be if there was a notice of
Violation. Okay, I'm sorry.
Not for the first notice of violation.
Okay.
It would be if you wrote a notice of violation and you had to write a second one because during a reinspection of a first notice of violation, you go there, do the second one to reinspect and the violation still hasn't been corrected.
And then how would that then be, so it's not a flat fee, is it hourly then, like the staff time? Is that how it would be
So
calculated?
It would be $200 per each occurrence for a notice of violation. Is
Yes.
that your question?
Yes.
$200.
Okay, so that's a flat fee as well, but
That's
that's the notice of violation flat fee.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
And that's, and I will say that's, you already have that on the building side. So you have some, like for example, currently on the books for your building inspector, building official, if there's also a fee if it's called a after the fact permit. Somebody does the work and then they come into they get a permit because of that. There's an additional fee for that. If there's a stop work order, if a building official, building inspector has to give a stop work order, there's an additional fee for that.
Okay.
So this follows that same model.
Tracking.
Yes.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. That's all I had, but thank you, Chief. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Chief, for coming out. So I noticed it's not on your list, but it was on the slide you put up for community development, elevator inspection. So do you all have anything?
I'm gonna go to that.
Yeah, would you mind, please?
Yes.
Yep, so so it looks like under community development, there's an elevator permit per floor, $100, and an elevator annual certificate, $75.
Yes.
Does your department do any work for them in
No.
getting that done? So, okay,
So that's why that's not in there.
and that's why I asked, because I noticed when you showed the Spotsy slide, Spotsy had it under fire.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
So they have it under fire and they don't have it under building.
Gotcha.
King George already has that in
Yes.
the building.
Okay,
So that is one of the few annual permits that they require.
gotcha. And then the other question is, so this inspector, part of that person's responsibilities would also be investigating fires?
Yeah.
So like the one that we had in Canterbury last week, like how many people do you have
So currently,
working on that investigation?
on that specific investigation? I had one assigned to that.
Okay,
Um,
and so then right now, that person has to come off the road and would not be available to run your calls too?
That's correct. So,
Okay.
and then we also have, that's correct.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Chief. So if I was a Walmart, would I have to pay a combined, like, commercial fire alarm inspection, a couple $100, and then, tire storage, corrosive materials like batteries? So would those be, when you went out to inspect a Walmart, it would cost them like $1,300? Or would it be just one price?
It could. It would depend on, we would set some perimeters based on what's in the fire code for battery storage. I don't know whether Walmart would meet it. They probably would. They typically store a lot of batteries. But yes, they would have automatic fire alarm system, fire suppression sprinkler system, and if there were any other potential things, but it could be $1,300.
So if they were found in violation of each one of those things, when you came back, would it still be the 200 or the 1,300?
It would be nothing on that violation.
So the next time.
If they didn't correct it,
Yeah.
it would be $200 per each occurrence.
Okay, thank you.
Per each occurrence, yes.
I had another question. I apologize. It came to me. So you said currently in our code for the safety prevention, what was the term? It's like SPF,
The SFPC,
FFP. Yeah, could you,
statewide fire prevention. Code.
statewide fire prevention. You said that Caroline and Westmoreland currently don't have that there in their code.
Correct.
We do, but we're not actually really enforcing it.
We enforce it.
Okay.
We don't have anybody dedicated assigned to enforce it. So
Okay.
it's being shared between myself, Chief Dixon, and I got a handful of others that are also
But all of these activities are not getting done, obviously.
correct.
So
So
I guess
we do our minimum mandatory state inspections.
okay, so I was trying to understand from the perspective of risk for litigation and what does it open the county to if we have that code in place, but we're not staffing the position properly?
There's no risk to it because the code also says that this is the minimum you have to do.
And we are meeting that
Correct. The
currently.
minimum is public and private schools, education, and licensed daycares.
Understood.
And then we do any of the complaint follow-ups. So if you called the state fire marshal's office and said, I'm staying in such and such hotel and they have the exits blocked, okay? The state fire marshal's office calls us. And then we go up and we follow up and say, don't block the exits. Here's your notice of violation. We follow up on it.
Okay.
And, take the appropriate measures.
Okay, good. Glad to hear that. At least we're following what we need to at the moment. I do appreciate, though, that this will help to make sure things are safe for customers at other facilities as well, beyond just the bare minimum. So
Yes.
I'm tracking. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Citizens, anything?
Hi. My first question was partially answered, I think. These are not one-time fees, they're annual? How often however the inspection takes place?
So for example, the plan review, that would be isolated based on let's say a one-time event.
Okay.
Pretty much all the others would be set on an annual permit basis. So let's say you had a commercial fire suppression, a sprinkler system. The permit would be given for an annual basis, and then we come in once a year and do the inspection.
Okay.
And we make sure that number one, that the system has, in that case, because the system has to be inspected and tested every year. So that's why you would be in there every year, because the system has to be, they're designed, they're required by code.
Mhm.
It's just right now, we're not ensuring that they're following the code.
Okay. And then my second question was, this would obviously apply to new commercial businesses coming in? Would it also apply to current, already existing businesses in the county would start? Okay.
Yes, it would, yeah. So, and that's, and I know it's always a little bit of hesitation, nobody wants to pay more money. We would, but I will say that, paying some of this money up on the front end really makes certain that the buildings are protecting the public that expects and assumes that you're keeping them up. We have been in places, Mr. Granger, you asked at the last, one of the previous work sessions, can I give you some examples of how having this position would mitigate fires? And in fact, I spoke to Mr. Miller about this, and I said, I was going through, I have pictures I have case examples. I'd be happy to share them with you, but I didn't think it'd be appropriate to come in and say, this is this commercial business, this is that commercial business, this is what was wrong here and there. And because I don't know if that would be appropriate to those businesses. But the short answer is yes. We have found problems that if we would have known earlier on, the fire prevention model is very hard. It's like proving a negative. You know, how does safety work? You know, it's a little bit hard to, really, wrap your arms around and say, this is the value of it, but we know there's value. And there's tons of case examples I could spend one of your whole nights telling you about. But this is, and whether it's this year, whether it's another year down the road or another year past that, this is something that we need to really take a hard look at because, again, and you can see what some of the other parts of our region are doing. They're dedicating to this because I'll give you one example and I'll be quiet. We already doing inspections at the Dahlgren hotels because the Navy says they got to have this authorized for people for the Navy to stay there. So that they won't authorize the hotel unless there's been a fire inspection to these hotels. They call them, I think it's a CNIG form. What it stands for, I don't know, but it's but they require that the buildings that they are paying people to stay in the hotel to do their work on base, that there's a fire inspection. And we have found problems based on that, one hotel didn't have a third-party monitoring system and didn't have a third-party monitoring system for their automatic fire alarm for over 5 years. And it was passed in because the employee I was talking to said, I've been here 5 years and we hadn't had it since then. So I don't know how long it's been. And we caught it under that we've also caught other ones where the sprinkler system was not effectively working in a hotel that people, large amounts of occupancy stay at. So, we'd like to get in there, have somebody dedicated, get in these buildings on an annual basis, ensuring that these life safety systems are in compliance. So, thank you.
Mr. Collins?
So does this help the commercial businesses with their insurance rate? Is there any benefit to them for insurance or for the ISO rating here or for the county residents and their insurance rating?
There is some benefit in regards to insurance. What it is, I can't tell you. I don't know. There's a lot of factors when it comes to ISO. There is a factor when it comes to community risk reduction programs and having fire inspections in regards to your ISO rating. My department gets inspected on that once every 5 years. Community development gets inspected on that once every 5 years from the building code standpoint. And typically what ISO does is they hit our department 2 years, 2.5 years, and then they get their department and it goes back and forth. So we're not inspected at the same time, but they do want to, there are points for that.
So there's no dollar value that you know of?
No. In fact, ISO, if you ask ISO, if you said, if I go to an ISO community rating from a 6 to a 5, and what would the dollar value of that be? They can't tell you because it's all based on third-party insurance. And they can't tell you what every third-party insurance is going to provide rating. What they do is they provide ratings associated on community risk. And the more things you do to minimize community risk, the better the rating you have.
Thanks, Chief. Just got a couple of questions. Up on your slide on Fredericksburg, civilian fire marshal?
Fire inspector. So these are non-sworn, these would be, these would be non-sworn, they, in their case, which one was that? Oh, that was Stafford County, 2 civilian fire inspectors.
Okay, yeah, that,
Is that what
Yeah,
you
that-
refer
yeah.
to? So these would be people that, that they would not be firefighters and they wouldn't have law enforcement authority. They would be fire inspectors to help do certain inspections. And that's, and this was based on what they told me, what they were proposing in their budget for, like we're going through for, next budget year.
okay, and then going back to the plan review stuff and building zoning.
Sorry. That one?
Maybe I missed it, but so for instance, fire damper, $150, that's through planning and zoning. Is that in addition to this here? Would this be an extra charge on top of their charge?
No.
Okay.
No, this,
That up there is off of this sheet.
so for example, the only one that may be an addition would be, let's say for their fire protection system for a spray booth, where it says $300, that would be their initial fee for a spray booth at a body shop initially. And then after that, the yearly one would fall under our fee. So like fire dampers, we don't have that in their kitchen hood system. Again, this would be the initial from the planning and initial inspection standpoint, not the annual.
That's the first time around. And then these would be years after that.
Correct.
Okay.
Or already existing ones, because there's a lot, I mean, like I said, we've never done this before. We don't have a permit process. I mean, we do initially for the, once you get your certificate of occupancy, you could have the building for 10, 20, 30, 50 years and never have had an inspection ever after that every year. So this would also, would be, the existing structures that would fall under play. But as far as a new structure, that would go to at their initial through what you have in place.
Okay. Have you spoken with Sheriff Giles and Commonwealth's Attorney Gussman about the enforcement aspect of it?
We have, yes.
And what's their view on everything?
We already have an ordinance in place now. I mean, that's, so we put that in place, few years back, 5 years ago, maybe. And then it was Sheriff Dempsey. So Sheriff Dempsey fully supported it. Commonwealth, Gussman, fully supported, and both had it in writing. And that's when we took it to the board then. So one of the hats that I wear, I'm your fire chief. I'm also your fire marshal. I can, and we can enforce the code. I currently write criminal summonses. Got to go to court on April 6th for a person that burned about 10 acres in the woods on a windy day during the fire burn season. And it took us several hours to put it out, and multiple thousands of gallons of water.
Okay. Last, private fire hydrant. What is that? A dry hydrant?
No, so that would be if you had the only one that, and again, some of this applies for what we have, some of it doesn't. This, the only one that I can think of that would have applied, and I don't think it applies any longer, would be like a Birchwood Power facility, where they have a private system that's not service authority owned or serviced, and it connects all the way to, like, say, a water source like a river, the Rappahannock, and they have several systems, fire hydrants, and a suppression system that's private to their industry. I can't think of any other ones other
Yeah,
than that.
that one just jumped out at me. I mean, I know a lot of these, obviously, we don't have, and I just had never heard of a private one, so thank you. That's all I have. Thank you for the presentation.
All right, thank you. Yep.
Can I have one more question? The fire hydrant thing, you brought it up.
Sure.
So like the fire hydrants that go into lakes, like, are they managed by the county and do they need to be inspected?
They, so this would not fall under that private fire hydrant thing that Chairman had mentioned. That's a dry hydrant, and they are not managed by the county per se. They're not managed by the service authority. They have to be back flushed. They say annually. We try to go out and back flush them as a fire department, and make sure that the infrastructure still works and in place. Some of the homeowners associations that, depending where they're at, will also take some ownership of them if repairs have to be done. We have one in Berry Plains, and then Presidential Lakes have one, but the lake's dry. Got one at Wilmot Landing. We have one in
Potomac Landing,
that's not a dry hydrant.
and the pond has a dry hydrant,
Yeah, that's actually pressurized.
is it?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, back there on that cul-de-sac
Mhm.
at the pond. Yeah. Yeah, that has pressure on it. And there's one at Wa Point. Many of these we got off that they've coordinated with Department of Forestry, get a dry hydrant grant.
So they don't have to get it inspected yearly.
No, they do not.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Moving on, number 5, expenditure comparison.
So for those of you who were on the board last year, this is a slide that Travis Kusenberry used to use and back to you last year. So what it does is it just gives you an overview, and it lumps expenditures into some broad categories and shows you in the current fiscal year, what our adopted budget was and what our right now preliminary budget expenditures are. And this is for all funds. So as you can see here, for just county government, last year, the total budget was 97+ million, 45 million of that was for the county operations. This year, in the preliminary budgets, we have a 47 million, almost 48 million request for county or departments, and a 2.358 million increase overall. Most departments would have increases. There were some funds that right now in our preliminary expenditures, last year we put money from the cigarette tax for capital transfer, so because it's not doing what we expected it to. So far, we've taken that out, and also we had built money in under the other. You would have seen the 1 million to the rate stabilization line item, and so that's been taken out. So that's why you see the decreases in those two lines there. So we just wanted you to have an overall look at what the county is requesting. And right now, we're still unknown about the schools. And Chris, if you could go on to the next slide. So the requested increase for everything across the board is in general fund is $6,099,208. The preliminary increase, and this is included in that 6 million, and this was taken from the preliminary presentation to the school board back on February 14th. initially we're anticipating asking for an additional 4.3 million. I do understand that they are having a budget work session tonight, which I would have liked to have attended, but I'm here, so hopefully they'll get the video put up shortly so that I can go back and watch that. So the increase request for general funded county operations is 1.7 million. Of course, that would have been greater except for those other two lines that had the reductions. So across certain departments, it is more than it looks like, but we had those reductions to offset that. And if all of the requests that are funded, we would need a total of $61,284,556 in general fund revenue. And in front of you tonight, the big sheet, we only did the general fund because we were going to be having a discussion on general fund. So that's where that figure came from. And I think that we've made a few changes too, so it might be a little bit different on that. And I know of a few more that we are going to need to make. Like I just realized when Mr. Clark was talking tonight, I wasn't at the last Board of Supervisors meeting, but I believe that the TAC approved funding for the fireworks, and that is in Parks and Rec, so that'll be coming out of that. And so then on the revenue side, funds from the state are still unknown. For discussion purposes and in front of you, you've got some revenue sheets. We used an estimate of a 3% increase for the comp board funded positions. And what I did was I did an analysis back from fiscal year 2015 up to fiscal year 2022 and kind of came up with an average. We still don't know what the exact figures are going to be. So that's just an estimate when you see it in the revenue spreadsheets. Uncertainty on the sales tax revenue due to the governor's proposal to eliminate sales tax on groceries. There is a proposed replacement for that funding, but until everything is decided on at the General Assembly level, we're not sure if it's going to equal what we currently are receiving or if it's going to be more or less. It's just an unknown. We're still awaiting the personal property valuations, and I understand that the Commissioner of Revenue's office was sending that up Monday of this week. So hopefully we'll be getting that back shortly. So I didn't play with any of the numbers on personal property taxes at this time. And so in front of you, you will have 4 different revenue sheets. One of them has and at the top, I wrote the rate in red. So our current rate is 73 cents. If with the new valuations on the properties, the total general fund revenue would be $62,228,000. And then if you looked at a rate of only 55 cents, that would only be $55,125,142. And on each of those, where it shows the rate, if you see in the real estate column, the proposed fiscal year 2023, that is the number that has been changed based on the tax rate information that was given by the Commissioner of Revenue's office. At 60 cents, it would be $57,098,159, and then 70 cents, $61,044,191. So we've got a lot of different scenarios there to kind of look at to start the conversation as to where we might want to go. And Mr. Miller?
I was just going to add that, again, these are just scenarios to kind of give you a perspective. Obviously, until you sat down with the school's budget and had it presented to you and have an understanding of where that's going to come in. And, there's uncertainty. We know that the governor's asking that they come back in special session on the 4th of April now. He's trying to encourage that it happens sooner. we know that he's called for it for certain on the 27th of April. So if he's able to get it earlier, then we'd have numbers a lot earlier. So again, this is just speculative. It's just analysis for analysis sake. We were going to, we talked about at the last meeting that we would give you some ideas of some things that we could cut. I think in all fairness to the departments under the general fund, it would be more fair if we let you all get a hold of the school board budget and then let us come back and start working on those things and maybe nailing down some revenue numbers a little closer once we get a little bit more information. I think Ms. Hahn indicated to me you said the comp board is meeting on the 12th, is
Yeah,
that
if you
right?
could go to the next slide.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
I cut you off.
No. Did not go in. So at the next work session next week is when the school is planning to present their budget to us. We had previously talked about Davenport coming and talking to us, and we were looking at that to be on April the 6th. And then I found out today that the compensation board has a budget hearing scheduled on April 12th at 10 o'clock in the morning down in Richmond. And I'm going to try to find out if you can attend virtually or if you can, I'm sure you can attend in person, but I'm going to try to attend that to see what's going on there as well. And of course, when I did the presentation, the General Assembly was supposed to reconvene on April 27th. And actually, the email that I received this evening after we came down here and started our meeting from the governor's listserv says that he has called them back. So they will be back on April 4th to work on the budget for a special session. He entered a proclamation today for that. So these dates could change down here, but the last possible date for a public hearing in order to have budget approved would be May 11th, because we have to have it back to the schools by May 15th. And if that's the case, then we would need to advertise that public hearing by April 27th. So
So we could do that. Okay. So that would mean your regular board schedule would mean the 19th. And
well, they actually approved it. Didn't y'all approve last year at a budget work session after we did the public hearing? Because we had a public hearing at a budget work session, I believe, didn't we? Or did we have it at a regular?
so the question I think we want to ask perhaps Ms. Lackey is if you're basically just having an agenda item on the 19th that's saying that you're going to hold a public hearing, does it have to have all the details to set that public hearing, or does that come at the actual public hearing?
We have to advertise with all of the budgets.
Okay. Okay.
So if it has to be, because I was thinking, and my memory might not be the greatest on this, but I was thinking that we did the public hearing during a budget work session, but we might have done it at a regular meeting. So I'm not sure what the meeting schedule is. And see, so the meeting, I guess the first meeting in May is the 3rd. And the next one is not till the 17th. So it would have to be the 3rd then.
Or you could hold a special meeting before the 3rd. As long as you meet the days that it has to be, it has to set. Can't obviously hold a public hearing the next day. You got to have so many days. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to advertise, I think, 2 weeks before with all of our budgets. So hopefully, once they get back in, because he's asking them to in his proclamation, is that he wants a swift solution to the budget when they reconvene on the 4th of April. So these other dates are kind of maybe up in the air right now until we know. And now that he has called him back, because I was just going on the dates of the 27th of them reconvening, but then we wouldn't have true numbers, and we would just have to go on estimated numbers at that time. Yes. So, and then basically at this point, we want guidance from you all as to anything else that you want from us in the meantime. I'm sure, you know, Dr. Benson will talk for a little while next, at the next meeting next week. And
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last year, I recall when he presented the school board budget, he brought us binders. And I mean, obviously, they're working on it tonight, so I wouldn't expect it like this week, but would there be consensus of the board to direct staff to reach out to him to see if he could send a set of those over to us in advance so we have some time to look them over? I mean, I know some of us have been following online with when they post their packet with the updates in their budget, but you know, tonight I would guess they would finalize it. And so if we could get those binders in advance, I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely.
Is that okay with my colleagues? Yes? Okay, thanks very much.
I would like one thing added in the budget from the schools, and I don't know if they had it in there, I don't remember last year, but I'd like to see a comparison of the enrollment from 2018, 2019, 2021, and 22. Yeah.
so from 2018,
Yes, to 22.
and I will tell you that, and I don't know what it was set at, but for the 2 years that during the pandemic, that the Virginia Department of Education did not, they set them at a flat ADM because they, you know, with children attending virtually, they couldn't get they didn't want to penalize anybody because somebody's connectivity wasn't good and the child couldn't attend class that day. So they went on their estimated figures for 2020, for the school year 19-20 and 2021. Whatever he was estimated for 19-20 was the same for both years, I believe.
Well, that's why I wanted to see 17-18, because then that would be a full year of non-pandemic. And
Right.
I would like to see the actual enrollment.
Ms. Han, thank you for providing the different revenue rates, just as a reference point to be able to see. I'm going to ask, though, I know that with equalization, the idea is it has to be within 1% of the revenues that were generated from the previous year. What would the tax rate have to be in order to meet that? My quick calculation says it would be about a 52-cent rate, but just to make sure I'm not
Our estimated last year was like 20 million, but based on
actual.
actuals, it's going to be closer to 21 million.
Okay.
So the 55, I think, was it the 55 cent? That
Yes,
was
is that
close
the
to
actually, okay. You're thinking that's going to be the 1%, within the 1%?
That's probably, so right in that ballpark. And you'll have to forgive me because I don't know anything about equalization. This is my first time with equalization in the county
Sure.
budget, so.
So I'll just share, what it has to do is looking at the previous year revenues, it would have to be within 1%. So if it was 20, like this percent, it's exactly 21 million, it had to be within 1%. The estimated revenues was $210,000. It couldn't be more or less than that. It could be less, I guess, but it couldn't be any more than $210,000. So I'm not going to ask you to give me the number right now. Just doing my quick math, though, I was based off the 20.5 million. I was getting about 52 cents is what I was thinking. But if it's possible to get that information, I would be interested to know what the rate would have to be if we want to 100%.
Yeah, we can get that.
Sure. Thank you.
Any other questions? Citizens, any questions? Okay. So next steps, we're gonna do next Wednesday?
And that's when, the school will be presenting next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday, 5:30?
If that works for you.
Yes, I'm amenable to that, yes.
All right, so I guess we're all done, so we have a motion?
I move to adjourn until Wednesday, March 30th at 5:30 PM in the boardroom?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are adjourned.